everybody, and welcome to the Aggieville Alleycats podcast, where come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. I'm Ace Edwards, right alongside
Connor Balthazar.
And that was more stressful than I wanted it to be.
You could say that again.
I was going to do the bit, but I don't think I do it. It was a 31-27 Wildcat victory in the Sunflower Showdown. Definitively, it was one of the games that we've ever had to play up against KU in history. Okay, first off, all credit in the world to KU fans for showing out in this game, being loud, being involved. I'm not sorry that you got your hearts crushed at all. That's just the nature of the game. But, credit to them. They showed out for their team. KU ends up coming just short. And first off, I guess from the very beginning, it's, Cole Ballard was a bit better than we thought he would be. But I feel like both sides are being a little bit reactionary here and saying, K-State fans saying that, oh, well, he was this really great quarterback. And KU fans saying, oh, no, he's a third-string walk-on. He was fine. A lot of his deficiencies got covered up by scheme, which, we said would happen, though we didn't expect it to happen the same way it did. But, yeah, Cole Ballard had a good game. Hats off to him.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. I mean, you and I have talked about this already. It's been talked about a little bit, but he was completely fine in one-read situations. Anytime we were able to get them into third and long where he would have to go through multiple progressions and would have to operate out of structure, it was kind of a nightmare. And that's no surprise. That's when he threw 2 interceptions, was situations where he wasn't necessarily within structure, especially that first one. The first one was just awful. And he didn't do as much differently. Like their game plan was was very similar to, I think, what it would have been even if they had Jason Bean. And interestingly enough, Leipold did say that Jason Bean was available and cleared, and they decided to go with Cole Ballard as a coaching decision instead of a health-related one. So, I don't know, take that how you will. But the staff felt that they had a better chance to win with Ballard than with Bean.
Yeah, I mean, I think the game plan that they came out with was really clever because it was basically just a game of keep away. And to their credit, it worked out pretty well for a lot of the game, just playing that keep away type of offense. Plus, with how Kotelnicki's offense works, with how it generates motion and bad angles, the quarterback running game worked exceptionally well in a way that I'm not sure how you adjust for without multiple weeks, because of how the motion just moves people out of position. If you run a speed option and one of the linebackers or a defensive back goes that way, sorry, you're out of the fit. Die. And, lo and behold, they did that. But, it was really well-called game by KU. This game made me exceptionally nervous. I was inconsolable for a pretty good portion of this game. Was somewhat happy that I was watching it alone, so no one witnessed it. But outside of KU specifically, K-State, I think, top to bottom, played an okay game. We definitely got a few lucky breaks, like the muffed punt, the pick six being dropped. But, you take wins as they come, especially on the road in the Big 12 against a ranked squad.
Yeah, and we had a few things go against us as well. The fumble that got fumbled at 25 yards downfield, I was going to lose my mind after that. And there's a few other situations where things didn't really go exactly our way. But, I mean, we grinded out a victory. And, yeah, I was just an absolute wreck during this game. I enjoyed the first 90 seconds of it, and everything afterwards I was in a really bad place. So I'm glad that we came out on top, because I may not have ever recovered if we had lost this one.
Yeah. I enjoyed the first 90 seconds and the last 90 seconds because watching Will Howard try to extend a play to just run additional clock off was very funny.
Yeah, that was funny with hindsight. It was not funny at the time for me. I was not comfortable even when Kleiman was on the field about to shake hands with Leipold with like 15 seconds left.
You thought we were going to crystal ball it?
You never know, man. And so I wasn't even sure after the clock struck 0. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, but luckily we made it through. Very ugly game, but a win is a win.
A win's a win's a win. So now we can go into the game day grade segment where we go through every single position group, including coordinators, giving them a grade from F to A+. F meaning they near single-handedly lost us the game, and A meaning they're near single-handedly won us the game. Starting with the man under center in Will Howard. He was 13 for 24, 165, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. Very, very lucky that it wasn't 2. And he also added a touchdown on the ground and 18 yards on the ground as well. This is another example of a Will Howard performance where I found myself whelmed with his performance because he didn't have this baller of a game that I really wanted him to have. And some of that was because sometimes his receivers were getting held and it wasn't getting called. And being fair, we were doing the same thing, so at least they were consistent. It wasn't screwing one side over. But Will just didn't adjust to that. And, sometimes it's hard to get adjust to your receivers being held. But you have to know that happens, and if you see someone stacked up nearby, you have to be willing to just not try to force the ball, be willing to eat an incompletion or try to run. And I think that was probably my biggest takeaway was I wish Will ran a little bit more. There were times in the game, not because Will Howard was bad, but because I thought that we could just give KU a bit of their own medicine with the QB running game. I kind of wanted Avery in. But that's not something I'm going to hold against Will. I ended up giving him a B- because it was a whelming performance for me.
I gave him a C. I really liked the first drive from him, and beyond that, it was very just fine. So I considered giving him a C+ for that reason, because there were definitely times in this game where he was just not good at all. But he was mostly just kind of eh. And I think that maybe some more of the issues kind of fell into play calling and maybe how we were attacking KU. I liked the idea of starting out with primarily passing because I think that they were anticipating us starting out running. But I think we maybe stuck with it a little too long. We were a little slow to adjust there. But what was okay. I do agree I would have liked to have seen him take off and run a few more times. There were definitely a few occasions where he should have and instead waited to throw downfield. And that's a really hard line to walk as a quarterback. I get it. But at this point in his career, I'm going to scrutinize him more for stuff like that because I know he's experienced enough to handle that. So he got a C from me, but definitely not his worst performance I've ever seen, just not his best.
God, no, it's not the worst performance we've ever seen from him. Now we got into the running backs, DJ Giddens and Trayshawn Ward. DJ ended up going for 102 with a touchdown. Trayshawn 63, along with 52 on 7 attempts. I gave them an A, and the only thing that would have been an A+ was, I know this is technically on Will, but I expect DJ to, with how massive his hands are, to come down with the ball that's slightly behind him. It wasn't a great throw. I'll give him that. But to me, the running backs had an amazing game, and just because they didn't get an A+ doesn't mean they didn't have an amazing game. I just don't believe that the running backs were the reason we won exclusively. They were a large part of it, which is why I gave them an A, especially DJ in his post-game interview. The only time I've heard that man laugh, we were all a little too turnt. I was a little too turnt. Oh, I love DJ.
I gave him an A as well. Trayshawn was just kind of fine. He had the one long run, which was great, but beyond that, he didn't really do a whole lot. Then DJ was really good. He was very consistent, which was good, especially down on the stretch. I would have liked to have seen him get maybe 4 or 5 more touches. Granted, one of them was like a drop. Not the best throw by Will there, although I think I think going back and looking again, he was getting hit as he threw. So that's part of it. But also, we've seen DJ make more difficult catches than that before. And we've seen him make more difficult catches while covered, and he was wide open. But there are plenty of blame to go around on that play, so I won't linger on it too much. DJ getting a touchdown, obviously big. And he kind of went back to that role that he had last year towards the end as the closer. Kind of. He was huge on that last drive. So an A for the running backs for me. They were pretty good.
Yeah. Receivers, outside of like 3 plays, they weren't really large. I mean, Jace Brown, I think, has proven himself to be probably the best or at least most consistent receiver in the room thus far, which as a true freshman is both really good and really bad for very different reasons. Especially on the first play of the game, Jace Brown dusting Kobe Bryant, which was very funny. But ended up not scoring a touchdown. Keegan Johnson scored a touchdown on 2 catches, and then Phillip Brooks had arguably the most important catch of the game. So all in all, this is another example of I'm all right with the performance. I gave him a B.
I gave him a C+ for basically being slightly above average. Jaden Jackson did not have a catch, but he did draw at least 1 defensive penalty, I think.
Probably should have drawn 2, but he definitely drew 1.
Yeah, because there was one that was, I think it was, I don't remember which one it was, but he just got absolutely manhandled by Kobe Bryant before the ball had even left Will's hand. Mm-hmm. And so that was a pretty obvious one. And then, Jace, I mean, he's now, in terms of yardage, number 3 on the team this year in terms of receiving yards. He's been awesome these last several games. He's shown some great ability to run routes, which that was his big skill coming in, and he's continuing to do that. He loves him a post route. Will loves throwing him a post, and he was good. Beyond that, there were a few times where Phil maybe could have had a ball that it looked like he gave up on the route. He still had the big catch, so I'm not going to ding him too much for that. But there were a few occasions where the effort wasn't always there. And Keegan Johnson, of course, the touchdown is nice. I'm glad he, at the very least, is getting receptions now, is getting touchdowns now. Still not producing at the level I think we want him to, though.
Yeah. Also, on the issue of Jace Brown, just always bet on the guy who can separate. Above all else, choose the guy who can separate. Tight ends, fullbacks, Ben Sinnott. It's the Ben Sinnott story. 4 for 39, a single touchdown, but a very, very impressive jump and one of the gritty attempts ever afterwards.
I don't think... I've seen people call it a leg dab.
No. It was immediately after that.
Oh, I didn't see it.
Yeah, it was not quite Mike Gesicki levels, but it was... We're reaching that territory, and honestly, I may ding him just for that. But again, another above average performance, but I felt like it could have been more. Credit to Ben Sinnott, though. He was getting his lunch money stolen every single time he was running a route. So I just ended up giving him a B+.
I gave him a B. His blocking was okay. There were a few times that he got blown up, but there were a few times that he made a big block. Swanson and Oakley played some, and they were okay. But yeah, Benson, on Will's interception, Benson had quite literally been tackled to the ground, and that went uncalled. It was still a bad read by Will. But
don't misunderstand. Yeah, should have been picked.
Yeah, but it probably should have not ended up counting because Ben was held and pulled to the ground. But he was still good. He has that touchdown early. That was through contact. And on a day where life was just really difficult for him just because of all the holding and pass interference, he still managed to have an alright day, so a B from me.
Yeah. Offensive line, this one is one of two people playing that I kind of went up and down with, because there were times that we were truly dominant on the offensive line of this game, and there were other times where I'm like, okay, come on guys, like you have to do a little bit better than that. And I know that there's going to be rep to rep inconsistency. That's just the nature of the position. But in a game that we should have manhandled KU the entire night because of how bad their defensive line is, we just ended up handling them as opposed to dominating them. And yeah, I know that affects... I shouldn't be grading them on like this unfair curve and unfair standard. I'm going to do it anyway. I gave them a B+.
I was pretty pleased with the offensive line, especially in pass protection. Will was kept clean most of the night. KT got beat once to the outside, and that resulted in a sack. But I gave them an A-. I liked a lot of what they did, and once again, they showed up when they needed to at the end of the game to help close out with some big runs. That's something that we've been really good at the last couple of years. Is our offensive line's been really well conditioned, and they're ready to close out the game along with DJ Giddens there at the end. And yeah, in pass protection, they were really good. I thought pretty much the entire night. I didn't have too many issues there. And yeah, the run blocking definitely could have been better though at times. Trayshawn was definitely struggling a few times, I think, with finding separation while he was in. And some of that may have been due to blocking. But still a pretty solid night overall, though.
Yeah. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball, starting with the defensive line. I know a lot of people look at the amount of rushing yards that KU got, 234 yards and 3 touchdowns. First off, not a lot of that is on the defensive line. A lot of that is on another position group we'll talk about very soon. The defensive line actually held their own for the most part. Of course, you would want them to make a few more splash plays than they actually made. And they did contribute to giving up 234 yards. But also, the other team has a Devin Neal on it who's running Wildcat and motion that makes it impossible to properly fit. So, you kind of have to grade a little bit of a curve, but the defensive line, I felt, did their job and did their job well enough. So I ended up giving them a B+.
I gave them a B+ as well. Khalid Duke had the big sack. Ultimately did not matter because they got a first down on that set of downs. But otherwise, the pressure was fairly decent. We got pretty good pressure on the late interception that Ballard threw into the corner of the end zone. And then we got good pressure on the other interception where Ballard was scrambling. So when the defensive line did get pressure, it was very impactful. And I thought generally they were good in that department. And then, yeah, I think that they did about all they could for defending the run, because KU is not a team that is going to be running up the middle into the big heavies very often. So they were able to do what they could in that department. And because a lot of their scheme was to try and get to the outside and get our linebackers in space, which, again, is, I think, something that we expected. But overall, I liked how the defensive line performed despite KU averaging nearly 6 yards per carry. Not a lot of that was on the defensive line.
Yeah, you know who it was on, though? That's the next position group, and that is linebackers. Now, if we were grading purely based on the first half, linebackers would have gotten an F because they're almost solely the reason why we were losing in the first half, because they were very, very, very bad at filling gaps. And I don't want to pick on one player in particular because none of them were particularly great at it in the first half. But Austin Romaine had perhaps his biggest game of growing pains that he's had this entire year. And KU knew it. So they just kind of said, all right, kid, figure it out. Austin Romaine did not figure it out, which sucks for him. He's a true freshman. That's going to happen. But I say all this knowing that they failed the first half, lo and behold, on a white steed, ready to save the day, was the hero we all should have been expecting. Bo Palmer. Bo Palmer near single-handedly turned the linebacking room around in the second half. And he did so well that he elevated this linebacker room from an F to a C+. Because not only did he play better, Austin Moore and Des Purnell seemed to play better around him. Maybe we should have just been expecting the Bo Palmer hero game from the outset. Maybe that's on us.
I guess we should have known. He is the Kansas native between him and Romaine. So.
The Missourian didn't get it, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's probably what it was. But, yeah, I gave the linebackers a C. Again, a lot of it was because of Bo Palmer. Austin Moore had a better second half. He had a tackle for loss at one point. But, yeah, Romaine, not his best day. Desmond Purnell got put in some really difficult positions several times against the speed option where there just wasn't a right answer. And beyond that, there's not a lot to say about them other than they weren't very good this game. They got exposed by Kotelnicki, and the variety of looks and formations and play calls that KU was throwing at them. And KU was daring our linebackers to figure out what they were doing, and more often than not, we were failing that task.
Yeah.
So it was a rough day for the linebackers. They put it together when it mattered most, but still a lot of the defensive struggles would probably stem from that room. So they got a C, and that's a generous C.
Yeah. Now we can talk about the defensive backs. KU did end up getting 162 yards in the air. However, 60 of those yards were on a complete bust in coverage / Andy Kotelnicki moment. They're interchangeable when you're playing KU. So outside of that, they allowed just a hair over 100 receiving yards, and also ended up getting 2 interceptions. The interceptions, of course, coming from Kobe Savage and Marquis Siegel. Siegel finally caught one. But I was impressed with the receiver's performance, or the defensive back's performance, especially given the general talent of the KU receiving room. I know it's against a backup third-string quarterback who, was told to run the ball a lot. I don't care. They ended up turning out like a solid A performance for me.
Yeah, I gave them an A-. I was really pleased. The Fairchild reception, I don't really put on the defensive backs all that much. That's just Kotelnicki scheming something up and putting a sub-athlete in a perfect position to look like an athlete. I mean, that was something we talked about in the preview. We knew that they were going to, at some point, make either Fairchild or Casey look like a All-American. And they did that with Fairchild on that play. And I don't really put that too much on the DBs. Beyond that, the only other major play that was given up was an underthrow to Luke Grimm. And that's just tough luck, really.
That's unlucky. That could have happened to anybody.
It was generally a really good day for the defensive backs. And yeah, it was against a run-heavy attack. But they still did their job when they needed to. Tackling could have been a little better. VJ Payne had a couple of big misses in tackling, but Savage and Siegel were really good. Payne still had his moments as well. All in all, it was a pretty solid day for the DBs. You can't complain too much given the passing game. It was really just the run in general. There's only so much a defensive back can do in the run. So they got an A-.
All right, here's the toughie. The coordinators, starting with Dr. Jekyll and Coach Klein here. He has had a few stretches this year where I don't know what he's doing, and I'm not sure he does either, but ultimately, every single time, except for once, it's balanced out with him redeeming himself with like 2 or 3 of the most brilliantly called drives you've ever seen. You got the lows in this game without the insane high, but I think the lack of insane high was because we didn't really need it. He called a, on the aggregate, fine game that peaked at good, but valleyed at icky. I gave him a C, basically shrugging my shoulders, didn't know which extreme to go for.
I gave Klein a D+, almost entirely, because I'm, at this point, it's getting really frustrating with how slow we've been to adjust to what is happening in the game. Will should have adjusted a little quicker to them not calling defensive pass interference and holding, but that's also something where Colin Klein needs to see that as well. And he needs to be maybe moving away from the pass game in that sense. Like, we threw 24 passes in this game, but DJ was doing pretty well on his own. Maybe we should have been going for more free access stuff as opposed to things that put the ball in danger, with receivers being held fairly often. So I wasn't super happy with how Klein called this game. He figured it out by the end, but it took too long again, or longer than it should have, I'll say. So that's where most of the bad grade comes from this week, is Klein once again taking too long to adjust to what's in front of him as opposed to what he prepared for.
Yeah. And it's becoming a somewhat troubling theme in the games where we don't dominate the opponents, where we will have 1 or 2 drives where you can just kind of pencil it up, like, all right, well, we may gain a first down here, we may not. I think that comes with him being still, you got to keep in mind this is his second year of being the official play caller. I don't think he did anything when he was the assistant OC. But you deal with the growing pains, but that doesn't mean that they don't hurt. Someone that I typically have a little higher expectation for is Coach Klanderman. And in the first half, I was more than willing to hand out the exceedingly rare F- because he was getting completely and utterly clown-suited by Andy Kotelnicki, which, being fair to Klanderman, that happens to a lot of people. However, it should not happen to you when you face them so many, like at this point, 2 or 3 times before, with as much film as they had, granted with a third-string quarterback. And you shouldn't be as slow to adjust as you were. It is not an exaggeration to say that the first half of the game was the worst half of Joe Klanderman's defensive coordinating career that comes to mind. I don't know what else contends. Other than, well, not even, I don't know, second half Alabama, but I think at that point we were just getting out-talented and there's nothing you can do about that. But lo and behold, okay, the first drive of the second half sucked. But after that, I was perfectly fine with how he called the game. And at that point, we sort of figured it out, and KU had a lot of issues scoring after that point. Funnily enough, when you make adjustments, they work. But it was so insanely frustrating just watching a really good defensive coordinator get absolutely exposed for a half. That said, I gave him a C.
Yeah, after 1 half plus a drive, I was honestly ready for him to get tarmacked. And I was not in a good mental state in regards to Joe Klanderman's performance after a half plus a drive. With the gift of hindsight, I do think a lot of that is because, well, we talked about in the preview episode, I really think KU spent 2 weeks prepping for this game at least. And I think they've probably had some of their analysts scheming and breaking down our film the entire season. And I think that I don't even say this isn't like a sense to make fun of them. I truly think in every sense of the word that they treated this as their Super Bowl as a coaching staff. So I think we got even more than the kitchen sink in terms of what Kotelnicki could throw at us. We got a quarterback, Wildcat looks that we weren't used to, with multiple running backs that we weren't normally seeing. There's a chance that they probably had like 20 unique calls for this game, at least. And there's only so much you can do as a defensive coordinator against that. But you have to fall back to your basics at some point. And we just weren't filling gaps when we needed to. And we just were completely lost. This was a unit that we knew we were going to give up points to, but the defense shouldn't have looked as lost as it did for as long as it did. So I gave him a C-, only because we were able to finish strong. I was going to go nuclear, though, after the first half.
Yeah, because they only scored 7 points in the second half, and it was on that first drive.
Yeah. So, the final, 28 minutes of game from the defense was really good. Forced 2 turnovers. Probably should have had another one earlier in the game, but, it was a rough game for the defense for a while. But luckily, they finally started to figure it out.
Yep. So those are the grades in how, 15 straight happened. Now we can give out the MVPs. This offensive MVP, I think I think both MVPs are pretty obvious, but offense at least has a second running mate. I'm going to pick Jace Brown for offensive MVP.
I'm rolling with DJ Giddens for this one. Same guy I said in the preview. That's pretty much the only reason I'm saying it. But
I said him in the preview as well. But, of course, the real MVP, as we alluded to earlier on the defensive side of the ball, do want to give fair shout-outs to Keenan Garber for special teams play, as well as Ty Bowman, Marquis Siegel catching his first pick on the year. But, weirdly enough, how could it be anyone else than Bo Palmer?
Yeah, Bo Palmer, the lone pass breakup of the day as well. He was awesome in this game. I had a sack. I forgot that happened.
Yep.
And was just generally really good. And he was filling passing lanes when he needed to and was generally being a nuisance and was the jumpstart that our linebacker core needed, because we're just so thin at Mike linebacker right now. That a guy like Bo Palmer stepping up late into the year is just a godsend for this defense. That's exactly what we needed. So he gets MVP and a ton of roses. So
yeah. So now the general takeaways from the game, given that, we only have, at minimum, 2 games on the year left. It's starting to sort of wind down. We still have one more rivalry game left on the year. But, Connor, how does it feel knowing that there are now high school freshmen who have never seen the Kansas Jayhawks beat the Kansas State Wildcats in football?
It's kind of weird to think about. Because, there was a point in my life where K-State dropped 3 in a row when I was 9 in the Prince era. So, for a while, it wasn't really a sure thing when I was a kid. But it is kind of easy to take it for granted until you put it into the context of things like the streak being able to drive to work and school, or the streak being 3 years away from voting. Trying about the streak being able to be adversely possessed or something like that.
The streak, its first presidency, or the presidency that saw its beginning, was the Bush administration.
Yeah. So it's kind of weird to think about, and it is easy to take for granted, I think. But I think maybe the game last night, with hindsight and with time to reflect, is a good thing in the long run, because now we can look at it and see it as being something that can be taken away. something that we can lose. It's not infallible or like impossible to keep. Maybe it's a bit of a wake up call. I'm not really sure, but the one last night had me feeling much more nervous than the one in 2018 ever did. Even in 2018 when we were trailing late. Maybe that's just because of the apathy of the 2018 season. I can't. That was just a rough year all around. But no, it was a gutsy win for us. And in a night where we did not play anywhere close to our best football. And for 1/2 plus a drive, KU played near perfect football. So it was an incredible win.
Yeah. All right, so for the next 5-7 minutes, we'll probably just be riffing before we actually conclude the episode. Or at least I will be. I imagine you'll jump in as well. Where does this rank in terms of all-time Twitter meltdowns? For both sides, actually. During and after the game.
During was a little less than I thought I would see from K-State. I think we kind of skipped all the stages of grief and went straight to acceptance from what I saw. I wasn't there. I was just in agony, but the meltdown from some parts of KU Twitter after was of the likes I have never seen in my entire life. Some people set new lows that I were unaware could even be attained. This was definitely one of the more entertaining KU hate weeks of my lifetime. Probably the most entertaining since 2019 with Les Miles and Who is K-State. Although I think that the side characters and cult of personalities from this year's will live on.
In infamy.
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe ultimately are more compelling characters than just KU's head coach not really being super aware of what's going on. But this was kind of an all-timer. I think there was some weird content that came out of this game as well. I think ultimately this is, and maybe in Sunflower Showdown lore, this might just go down as the weird one because the KU fan reactions were kind of strange. The K-State fan reaction, I don't really think we know how to feel other than just be glad we survived for another year. The player reactions were funny. Some of the KU fan reactions were just
funny, but for a completely different reason.
Some of them weren't funny. Some of them were genuinely concerning. And I don't really know what to make of this. If this is how this year went, I don't even want to think about like this off season. I mean, because if there's one thing that this particular game did, it's maybe give the KU side of this rivalry dose of adrenaline. Give them a shot of energy that they seem to have been lacking for 15 years. I really hope that this jumpstarts them into ending their kind of hibernation, look down your noses, we're better than you, and go into genuine hatred.
I've long said that I have welcomed a good game. Alright, so just from my perspective, there are a few very entertaining things. Ratioing someone who has, I think, upwards of 20 to 30 of the amount of followers that I have was very funny. The all-time rant, we're not going to say names because if we're not going to send people anywhere else, that however our audience is, I have more faith in our audience than most podcasters do with their audience, but still, it's just good policy to not name names. But the absolute legendary rants that were had after the game will probably sustain me for the next 6 months. Anytime, we're probably going to lose to KU basketball in Allen Fieldhouse this year, because we always do. But, when I'm sad about that, I'll just pull up that rant and say, wow, that's amazing. I'll never be that pathetic in my life. This one I can say because he's on K-State's side.
You know, I don't think there's anything really stopping us from saying his name. I mean, I don't want to give him the power of keeping him anonymous. Plus, half the people listen to this know who it is. It's Bryson Stricker. And we've long not been fans, I guess.
I didn't know who he was before this week.
I had seen him and I just muted him back in realignment. Like, all the way back in, like, the original wave of realignment, I muted him.
Oh no, I was thinking of Mike Vernon, the KU to the Big Ten is imminent guy.
Mm. Yeah, but...
I got introduced to him because he had beef with DY. Of all the people you're going to pick to have beef with, you're going to pick DY.
It was a really weird week. But I think we needed it. I think that this was needed.
Don't worry, man. This game was definitely a Stephon Diggs moment.
Yeah, the Liberty Bowl also was. And... the Sunflower Showdown last year also was.
Yeah, it was an all-time week. Just if you can find Allison Renner's calendar for the week that transpired before it, you'll realize how weird the week was. But yeah, the next game we have, It's always entertaining, rivalry week for Farmageddon. I challenge it to both not be and be as entertaining as the Sunflower Showdown week, but I hope it's entertaining for... I kind of hope it's entertaining for different reasons.
Something tells me it's gonna be a little bit of a slower rivalry week to begin with, because Iowa State's coming off a bit of a gut-wrenching loss where they kind of hung around to Texas, maybe had a good chance, and then we're coming off of a week where we expended a lot of energy on Twitter, so I think that maybe it'll be a bit more sleepy of a Farmageddon this year, but I hope not. I hope that we can inject a lot of energy into it. I hope that we bully Iowa State's AD for not wanting to keep K-State Iowa State as a protected rivalry, because that seems to be the prevailing narrative right now, is that Iowa State's AD didn't want to keep K-State and Iowa State playing every year, which I do not understand at all. And also we need to bully both Iowa State's AD and our own Gene Taylor into adopting Farmageddon as the official name of the rivalry.
Fargo Gene, your move.
Because he's definitely listening. So
yeah, he may know who we are. He probably doesn't. But that pretty much wraps up this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. Thank you all so much for listening. If you want to follow or contact the show, you can follow us just about anywhere at Aggieville Alleycats. If you want to email us, we're AggievilleAlleycats@gmail.com. If you want to follow us on a more personal note, I'm at ACEdward00.
I'm at Connor Balthazar, capital C, capital B.
And if you want to support the show financially, please be sure to check out the official Aggieville Alleycats merch store. Link in our Twitter and podcast bios. But most importantly, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast, where come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. Stay safe, Alleycats.